Yo, what is going on, everybody? It's Brave Cat here once again with another Frontier Signals update. So let's go ahead and run through everything and see what some other people are talking about, because there's some interesting discussions going around. But first, let's take a look at the space weather, where things are still quiet, and by tomorrow, I think that will definitely change. So the coronal hole is now directly facing us, but I'm pretty sure the coronal hole stream will probably start hitting sometime tomorrow, just because, you know, the edge of the coronal hole started facing us a little bit earlier. And it's looking pretty gnarly, so the way this thing has developed since it has been turning in has been pretty rapid. And we've even seen something interesting go on down here. If you see that, I'll go ahead and replay it. There's like some sort of plasma filament here that instead of releasing outwards, it's almost like something kind of released inwards and kind of added to the coronal hole. So I'm not exactly sure what this exact phenomenon is, but you can see this plasma filament, it kind of injects itself into the coronal hole basically, and, you know, helps kind of grow it. So I don't know, that was pretty bizarre to see, and I didn't really catch it yesterday, but looking at it now, yeah, that is quite something, isn't it? So yeah, we're probably going to have at least a G1 storm, if not maybe even a G2 storm, depending on how the BZ reacts and what the phi angle does. You know, if we have a more southward impact, then that could definitely escalate things. So there was a post, well, from one of Ben's live streams where he got a comment on 0 days, which means when we have a KP of 0 for essentially 24 hours, which, you know, while we're during solar maximum, that's not really possible. But when we hit solar minimum, then there's going to be some days, or even in some cases multiple days, where we have a continuous KP of 0, and the effects of that are actually pretty much the opposite of what you'd expect. You would think when the KP is at 0 for, you know, a whole 24 hours or so, that, you know, there really shouldn't be any strange effects or anything like that. But it's actually the opposite. So just like how the magnetic field protects us from solar and cosmic rays, well, the sun itself and its activity also helps protect the, I guess, the solar system in general from those broader cosmic rays from, you know, the galaxy and, you know, all these faraway stars. So when we have a KP of 0, then you actually see a lot of crazy events unfolding in people's health, both mentally and physically, you know, hospitalizations, strokes, all that sort of stuff. So I'll have that linked in the description, as well as this. So people are talking about Yellowstone. Well, the New York Post is talking about Yellowstone nearing eruption, and it's kind of misleading. It's a little bit deceiving here. You know, they talk about how, you know, the giant magma chamber underneath there works, and, you know, studies between other supervolcanoes and, you know, recorded events in the past. So yeah, this thing has had super eruptions in the past. But, you know, even if this thing does have any sort of actual eruption, you know, the actual mechanism underneath Yellowstone, the magma chambers themselves, are still pretty much broken, and all the different geysers in the area also help release pressure. So no matter what, there's really no chance of a mega eruption. And, well, if there was, well, that would spell doom for the entirety, pretty much, of North America. But yeah, it's pretty much not even possible for, you know, this to have any sort of mega eruption anytime soon. It is essentially a broken system, so if it does have any sort of eruption event, it's going to be quite minor, quite small, and something more in line with a minor volcano. So I'll have that post as well in the description. You know, there's a lot of, you know, there's quite a few interesting comments in there. I'll just say that. So that's kind of what we're looking like there. And when we take a look at the earthquakes here, So, there's going to be some kind of observational research happening here and kind of comparing different ideas. So, in the last 24 hours, yet again, we've seen quite an influx of tremor events, not just on the West Coast, but also down here in Texas. So there's definitely a lot of kind of movement and pressure happening here. But on the tremor map, there hasn't really been anything. So that is a little bit suspicious. But, we still have all of this to go off of here. And so I'm going to test a couple of little forecasted things that Dutch Sense has been saying. So he is specifically saying to watch for the southern part of the Gulf of California, or potentially a 6 to strike here. So I guess we'll just kind of see if that actually happens or not, and judge things accordingly. Let's see, what was the other thing he was looking for here? So that was in between Costa Rica and Nevada, which both had 5.7s. And then he's also looking for the New Madrid zone to pop off again with something up to a 3.5. So the New Madrid seismic zone is over here, where we have this, pretty crazy bend in the plate here. That one actually does seem a little bit more likely, not really too far-fetched of an idea, because we've been seeing activity like that striking over here recently. But we'll just see what happens. We've had a 6 down here between New Zealand and the Fiji area. So that is really the only, I guess, kind of substantial earthquake that's happened lately. And taking things over here into Europe. So there's been a little bit more activity over by Italy, but it's mostly kind of focused in the kind of mountainous areas, not really as much in the volcanic areas. And a little bit of influx over here kind of in the southern Mediterranean. And then there's also been some slightly deep events. So there's like a really small cluster that just happened over here. Not actually exactly sure where this is, but that has been going on there. So not really too much else to report here. Just kind of the same usual stuff, except for what we got going on here on the West Coast. That is always going to be from here on out pretty much in the watch zone to see what's going on. And, speaking of other, I guess, volcanoes and stuff, because that was on the talk for today, going through this here, there hasn't actually been really a whole lot besides, the usual eruptions going off. Sabancaya, Peru, Sangay, Fuego, Dacono, and, some of these others here. So yeah, besides, what people are talking about here with Yellowstone, there's really not much going on there. Let me just see here if there's anything else I was going to discuss. Not really. I guess just watch out for the coronal hole and its incoming stream from that. So, definitely expected to see some earthquake potential coming from that. But, other than that, everything else looks pretty good. The, farside sunspots, those, haven't really changed much. If I just go down here really quickly, this red zone here is going to be coming in here probably within the next week or so, or at least, starting to. But it doesn't really look like there's too much to expect from that. So, oh yeah, and other than that, so I'll give a little update on the tropical storm related stuff. So this one is still going on, even though it hasn't been, it's not going to hit any major landfall. There is a ton of these little islands that have been in its path. So that is pretty intense for these islands here that are experiencing that. But this thing is kind of trailing off into the middle of the Pacific. And since the breakdown of the AMOC, the ocean currents, and the rise in the surface level water temperatures, I've also been hearing talks about a potential tropical storm to hit the West Coast, California, which would be quite devastating, but, I've been hearing different things about that. So I guess we'll just see if anything develops out of there. And, with that, I think I'll wrap that up here. So I hope y'all enjoyed. Got something out of it for today. Please like and subscribe for more. Share this video if you dare. And as always, I'll catch you all in the next.